Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and they're back with another Marvel Snap video. So, going over some decks for the hot location this weekend, which is Elysium. This is always kind of a fun one. Makes all cards cost one less. So we get to do a bit more greedy things than we normally are able to do in a regular game of Snap. So we're going to go right on through here and take a look at some decks for all the different pools that can make use of this location. Now, if you haven't heard, the hot locations changed a little bit. Before, they used to be a 60% appearance rate, now they're 50%. And the same is true of the featured locations, and now both of those are only 24 hours instead of featured being 48 hours and the hot location being 24 hours. Figured I'd mention that because that did change relatively recently. Starting out here with our Pool 1 deck, we have Pool 1 on reveal. Pretty standard on reveal cards here, just a lot of the good stuff, but we are running it a little bit more top heavy than we normally would because of this location. So we have things like White Tiger, Gamora, and Spider-Woman as our big, powerful, high-end on reveals. And then we obviously have Odin to get our effects going again, which is always nice. For the early game, we just have some good one-drops in Korg, Nightcrawler, Rocket Raccoon, Angela. And then our kind of mid part of the curve here, we have some more good on reveals in Ironheart and Wolfsbane, Mr. Fantastic to help spread the power around, and White Queen for some information as well as an additional card. Moving on to Pool 2 here, starting off with some upgrades to the Odin on reveal deck. We do get some powerful new additions in Pool 2. The main notable ones here are going to be Jubilee, who has very good synergy with Odin, and the fact that we're running a pretty high curve version of the deck, cheat out a big thing, or we can cheat out Odin, who will then re-trigger the Jubilee, and we get another thing, so that's pretty good. We also get Sunspot, who's very good with Elysium, because we're going to be paying less mana for our cards, so Sunspot will have more mana to pump himself up with. And then Scorpion as our last addition here. Scorpion just very, very good early game drop that goes in theme with the deck, and since we have the cards cost one less, sometimes we'll actually be able to get Odin out on turn 5, so maybe we'll be able to get more than one Scorpion effect going. You could also consider Shang-Chi in this deck, but I do think it is a pretty limited number of things that Shang-Chi can hit while in Pool 2, but if you're seeing a bunch of Devil Dinosaur, might be worth considering. And our second Pool 2 deck here is a Devil Dinosaur deck. Dino always has been an all-star in Pool 2, and now we can afford to run it a bit higher end if we want with the location. We do have a relatively standard build here, but we're actually going to be focusing on Storm because the Dino really doesn't need the cost reduction as much as some other decks. So perhaps we can just get rid of the cost reduction to try and mess up the opponents who are trying to take advantage of that. And so we have some good cards to go with Storm here. Jessica Jones, obviously a really good one to play after you play your Storm. You have some solid early game. Sunspot's always really great with Storm. Nightcrawler obviously as well, and he's good with Angela. Abel gives us a card from the opponent's deck, which can be very nice. Also for information, Sentinel just keeps our hand nice and big. Speaking of keeping the hand big, we have Moon Girl, who's really good with this location, and obviously Dino, as well as White Queen. And of course, we're going to have namesake of the deck here, Dino. Vision just as another way to move between the different locations, even if they're locked down, and kind of keep the opponent guessing. And then Chavez for a decent thing to play on 6, and to give us more consistency in finding the cards we're looking for in the early game. Moving on over to Pool 3 and above, starting out with another upgrade to the On Reveal deck. So this time we have some very powerful other additions with things like Shuri and the Black Panther combo. So get a really big Black Panther and then double it up with our Arm Zola. Also, we have Wong here, so if we don't get the Shuri, we can actually just throw Panther into the Wong lane, and that way we can Zola on the final turn and it'll double up both of them. We have Shang-Chi because you see a bit more big things, so the value definitely gets a bit better. And we just have a little bit less in the early game here to make space for this stuff, but I think that's generally pretty fine. Other than that, very similar deck, just has a bit more high power to it. Next up, we have another upgrade here for one of the Pool 2 decks. This is the Pool 3 version of Devil Dinosaur. Very similar list as Pool 2, but we have 3 major upgrades here. She-Hulk, who is very good getting doubled up with Moon Girl and has obvious synergy with us pumping up our Sunspot. And we also have Dr. Doom. Doom is one of, I think, the best 6 drops around right now, and is especially good when we are locking down a lane with Storm, but just overall adds a lot of power and helps us fight for all 3 lanes. And then Quinjet. Quinjet, not as popular as it used to be because of the nerfs. I do think the impact to the Dino deck is much smaller than some of the other decks for Quinjet, and it still serves a role here in making our Sentinels cheaper and making our Moon Girl and White Queen cards cheaper. Still a overall good card even after the recent changes to it. So if you're looking for a Dino deck to play in Pool 3, this is what I would give a try. Next up, we have the big bad purple man himself, Thanos. Thanos deck got hit pretty decently hard with the recent nerfs, and I think the best way to go with it might no longer be Lockjaw, though that version isn't necessarily bad. This one I have really enjoyed. This is from Lambie, really great content creator for Snap, and he plays in a lot of tournaments, does very good deck building. And I've tried this out myself quite a bit, and I really like it. So it's a more control-y version of Thanos. We have cards like Spider-Man and Professor X to lock down a lane for us on turn 5. Daredevil helps us be able to predict that more easily. And then Valkyrie is how we can often close out the game if we're not just slamming a big thing in Thanos or our dinosaur here, or just destroying an opponent's big thing with our Shang-Chi. Definitely a much more control-y version of the deck. We do have Hood here because the demon is rather good with Valkyrie. Also, the -2 body isn't as big of a deal when we have things like Valkyrie and Bast to help negate that. Beast might seem like a bit of a strange inclusion here, but it can actually be pretty good to return our stones to hand or return the Hood to hand, and then play them elsewhere and get the powerful on reveal effects going again. And then Bishop has some very nice synergy with the fact that we're going to be playing quite a bit of cards with all of our stones. So if you're looking for something to do with Thanos after the recent changes, this is definitely a very fun and effective way to get some use out of him. Another deck I've been enjoying quite a lot of after the recent changes has been Silver Surfer. So Surfer has not really been popular for a while, but I think now he's finally starting to make a bit of a comeback, and this is the list that has done really well for me. The big thing about it is we have a lot of ways to control the lanes with things like Storm, Juggernaut, as well as Goose. Goose is really good at shutting down some of the bigger Shuri decks, as well as just big decks in general, because they have a hard time playing their cards into our Goose lane. Now, I do have Negasonic in this list. I know most people probably won't have this card. If you're looking for a substitution, I think Cosmo is a really good one you can replace with this. And she's mainly here as a tech against Shuri, as I think that's the matchup she has the most impact in. But if you don't have her, Cosmo definitely a good choice to put in that slot, and the deck should still function fairly well. Other than that, we just have a bunch of good 3-drops, Goose and Scorpion as our 2 early game pieces. You could also put in a Lizard or an Iceman if you want a bit more early game, but this is the version I've been liking a lot. I think Killmonger is actually really underrated right now. He's been kind of an all-star for me. And then Polaris as well, just getting to move things around, especially against a Shuri player, moving their armor out of a lane or pulling out their 1-drop so we can Killmonger has been really good. And obviously Sarah is pretty good with the location, as it lets us get down Sarah a turn earlier, and then with her and the location, our 3-drops will only cost 1, which is pretty ridiculous. And last but certainly not least, we have what is probably the best deck in the game right now, Shuri Red Skull. So even though this deck did get hit with some slight balance changes, it actually got better because of the nerf to Arrow, as well as the nerf to Thanos. So this deck is actually the Stone Cold Nuts. There's really not a whole lot to say about it. If you've been playing ladder at all in the past month, you've probably run into it. Really, the only change that was made is removing Arrow for Vision. Possible Arrow isn't the worst in this deck. Sometimes she can still be good, but I found the flexibility and mind game aspect of Vision has been very beneficial, as well as being good with some of the more lockdown locations. Other than that, it's a very standard Shuri list. We're just trying to get out our Shuri into playing a big thing afterwards, like Red Skull or Vision or She-Hulk. And we want to make sure we can protect our stuff here with things like armor and Cosmo. Other than that, we just have some good 1-drops in Zero, Titania, and Sunspot, and some more mid-game cards with things like Blizzard and Polaris, and of course Taskmaster to copy whatever big thing we play after the Shuri. So there we have it. Those are all our decks for tonight's hot location, Elysium, and that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.